All right, we are back. Welcome to the Osceola's FSU National Signing Day special. I am joined by Osceola recruiting analyst Charles Fishbein, Osceola managing editor Bob Ferrante, and Osceola senior football writer Kurt Weiler. This is the second time Fish and I have been on the live today, but listen, it was a big day in Tallahassee for the Florida State football program. It was Christmas for recruiting folks. FSU signs 22 high school, junior college, or transfer portal players, 12 on offense, 10 on defense. And guys, it's an impressive class. We got one guy that did not sign. We'll get into that a little bit later. But Fish, we'll get right into it. You and I had a chance to go thoroughly through the whole class earlier. We're going to let Bob and Kurt talk a little bit about their impressions of this class. But before we're going to get into the offenses, which we're going to do the first 30 minutes of the show, just quick, your overall assessments of the class, Fish, as a whole.
Yeah, my belief is that it's about balance, strength top to bottom, and they did a very good job if you add the portal kids in the whole class. That's the main thing. I don't like classes that you have 4 linebackers one year, 0 the next. It just screws up the whole roster, especially from a roster management standpoint. They seem to balance things out. They got a quarterback, which was a big need for them moving forward. I thought overall this is one of the better offensive classes they've signed, especially from a skill set. And their offensive line getting the 3 transfers plus the 2 high school kids, along with what they got last year. I thought they hit a home run.
Bob, what are your thoughts just on the overall class before we break down the offense?
I think similar to what Fish said, it's about balance, but it's also about you've got to hit the portal to, complement the high school signings that you've got. I think, some good questions about how do you weigh things. You can sign more than 25 guys now. You have to stay under 85 scholarships, but you need to go out there and meet your position needs at whether through the high school JUCO or transfer portal ranks. I think they've done a really, really good job of that with this class. It's going to be, again, creating good competition on this roster. I think we've consistently seen elevated position groups throughout these past few years, maybe none more an offensive line, just with, the quality and quantity that's been signed through the years that Alex Atkins has to work with. So I think, again, for me, we're seeing the roster elevated. That's a pretty good storyline for us.
Kurt?
Yeah, like Bob said, you're in a good spot when you're FSU and you're like, 5 offensive linemen's a lot, huh? It wasn't a year where it felt like you really needed, but it's a nice problem to have. We see how the injuries happen there. But yeah, no, this was a class that I think was good. This was, I know some people may be like, but you're coming off a 9-3 season. Isn't that where you should maybe be a bit higher? I would say that doesn't, especially when it comes to rivals, doesn't factor in the portal, which is an important part of this. And I would say I think that how you're seeing the early shaping up of that 2024 class is where I think this year's success may play a bigger role. But no, I think it addressed the needs like they've said. I think it's balanced in terms of hitting positions. I don't think there's a real weakness where there's I think they could have maybe afforded another person here or there. I think they kind of across the board addressed what they needed to. And that's important because, I think we can all agree that was not the case last year, at least through the high school ranks.
Yeah. Well, guys, they looks like they did very well in the portal again. I think that's my overall take, and I agree with you guys. The balance, and Fish and I talked a little bit earlier. We think there's some sneaky good players that have not been talked about enough, and we'll get into that as we go through the breakdown. Fish, I want to talk with you. I'll start with you. FSU did not look like it was going to have a quarterback there for a while. They were able to flip Brock Glenn from Ohio State to Florida State, and we heard Tony Tokart talk about him earlier. Seemed like the perfect fit for Florida State. They had a long relationship with him. What are your impressions of Brock Glenn and how he fits into Mike Norvell's offense? And obviously, you and I have talked a little bit about who he reminds us of about. That was a former Florida State quarterback. So just kind of compare and contrast and offer your thoughts on Glenn.
One, and I've brought this up a bunch of times, I'm a believer in the Ron Wolf draft theory as a GM of the Packers, is you draft a guy every year. I think at the college level, you got to also go out and get a quarterback every year. It's very important. Brock Glenn comes in late in the process. You didn't think they're going to sign a quarterback this year. He has a lot of the tools that fit in what Mike Norvell wants to do offensively. He has a very good arm. He has ability to throw guys open. He's accurate when he has time to throw. Now, does he need to work on a few things? Yes. His footwork and his throwing mechanics need a little tweaking, but you've seen what Coach Torkaz has done, and so has Mike Norvell with Jordan, and they've made him a better quarterback. So I feel they could do the same thing with somebody like Brock Glenn.
Yeah, and the comparison you and I have made to former Florida State quarterbacks, and you have to be a little bit older to remember this guy, is Casey Weldon. He kind of is built like Casey, tall, throws the ball really well, sneaky athletic, can do the play action stuff, great pocket awareness, and just carries himself well on film when he's in the pocket and leading his teammates. Fish, we've heard Mike Norvell talk for 3 years now about this is a offense for playmakers, and we started seeing that this year. And he got a playmaker at running back, Sam Singleton. Talk a little bit about Sam. He's a guy, when you watch film, breaks a ton of big runs.
The one thing you look at, Florida State has a great stable of backs. Trey Benson's been great. But you look at somebody like Trayshawn Ward, he's been very successful, but he lacks that top end speed. I think Singleton brings that to the backfield. He gives you that big playability. And like I said on an earlier podcast with you, I like the ability for those stretch runs. It used to be Dalvin Staple. And I think that Singleton, you can stretch, run those stretch plays. He could get out to the outside. He's not a very shifty guy, but once he gets in the open field, he could pull away from defenders and get you those big plays and those big touchdowns.
Yeah, he's got impressive tape. As you said, he's a quick north-south runner, doesn't make a lot of cuts. He gets upfield, has the ability to make those jump cuts when he feels pressure from the inside on inside runs and kind of finds a hole. And he can catch the ball in the backfield too. You see that on his tape. Now I want to switch over to receivers, Bob, and you've kind of been our expert in receivers. And when we go to practice, you, at least until this year, had been stuck with a wide receiver group. You had a much better practice season than you have in the past 3 years that we have covered Florida State. But Florida State signs Vandrevis Jacobs, Hakeem Williams, and Darren Goldie Lawrence. Obviously, as when Fish and I were on earlier, there was some concern because Hakeem had not sent in his national letter of intent. We got some questions in that broadcast. Just your overall impressions of the receiving group, and obviously how important it was to keep Hakeem Williams a part of this class.
Yeah, I think, Pat, I've been playing the long game with this receiver group. I mean, you take all the drops for years and years, and then you get a class like this that looks like it's something that could shape up into something that's a lot of difference makers here. And yeah, I think you're going to sweat a 5-star in Hakeem Williams just because of what happened last year with Travis Hunter. I mean, it's the anxiety of, I think, most fan bases right now in the name, image, and likeness era. You're going to be worried about what could happen, what school could pop up with some kind of enticement to get a prospect to their school. I think Hakeem has a chance to be a true difference maker, and it's going to take time for a freshman receiver at Florida State, to make an impact. We haven't seen too many, through the years. We've seen a Rashad Green and Travis Rudolph as freshmen make impact. So I think you're going to want to look for more of a contribution and not necessarily a starter out of this group, but to get a 5-star, to send a statement, to get a kid out of South Florida, away from a Miami, away from an SEC school. A Hakeem Williams is a guy that you can, truly use as a big piece of your offense and as a decoy too, that, he will open up space for other receivers.
Yeah, and Fish, I do want to ask you about Hakeem. There was a lot of talk late towards the process that Miami was making a late run at him, and as was Colorado. What are your take on the importance of landing him for Florida State?
Oh, it's a huge get just because he's such a talented receiver. You're talking about one of the top receivers, not only in Florida but nationally. They really, Florida State's had a lot of really good receivers in the history of their school. You've had the Peter Warks and stuff. But those guys like Julio Jones, the Randy Mosses, I'm not saying this kid's going to be that because those are Hall of Fame players, but he has the ability to be one of those big play threats. He's a big physical receiver. I don't think most people realize, unless you meet Hakeem in person, how big and physically impressive he is for a kid that's in high school. He does not look like a high school kid. He looks like a kid that's been in college for a couple years. It's very impressive.
Yeah, and listen, a guy that may take a little bit longer to develop because he's smallish at this point in his physical development is Dre Jacobs. You watch his tape, and the guy is unbelievable with the ball in his hands after the catch. Did anybody get a chance to watch him? And Kurt, I'll ask you, what are your thoughts on Van Trevis Jacobs?
Yeah, I think you if you ask I think someone asked Ron Dugans today, and I think the word he used to describe him was just dog. I mean he's a guy Hakeem, if you look at Hakeem's stats, it probably doesn't do justice to the player he is if you're just going off of high school stats, which can be a finicky thing. Van Trevius was, I know, kind of a late bloomer type, and I know a lot of credit to Florida State. We talked to him Sunday for kind of getting in on him early, and he stayed loyal as he kind of blew up this year, got that fourth star. I think he, until the last week of the season, or very late in the season, led the state of Florida among high school receivers in receiving yards, and had, I think, 21 touchdown catches this year. An impressive guy, like you said, maybe not the physical specimen. You see 167 could definitely stand to add a bit of weight and fill out that frame, and I think we'll benefit from not having to have a big role right away. Like you may have asked more of him, and Hakeem for that matter, if they were a year older and arriving into what was a pretty question group this season. But I think he'll get that time, and I mean that production though speaks for itself and what he's able to do.
Yeah, he is fun to watch on tape. There's no doubt about that. But looks like a really good, solid class of receivers. You know what? Going back to the portal, Kurt, my man Biscuit's going to have some competition at tight end. They signed Jaheim Bell and Kyle Morlock today. And obviously, Jaheim and Morlock were wanted by a ton of schools. Just talk a little bit about what they bring to Florida State's tight end room and to this offense.
Yeah, you say competition. I say Mike Norvell likes to use 3 tight ends at once sometimes on the goal line. I mean,
hey,
I think
I'm fine with 13 personnel.
Little 13 is pretty fun, and Mike Norvell definitely likes to use that. Yeah, no, I think it was a situation where I think you liked what you saw from Marquise and Douglas this year. I think he improved as the year went on. I mean, really athletic for the size that he has. I mean, a bigger dude, both height and weight, but moved pretty well for that. And I think grew as a blocker. But these two, what you're bringing in with them, I mean, I think Jaheim Bell's a guy who, I mean, with how Mike Norvell likes to use the tight ends, is going to get used in so many different ways. I mean, I think in the last 2 years at South Carolina, had over 700 receiving yards and over 300 rushing yards, 10 total touchdowns, does a lot of things. And I mean, with the loss of Cameron McDonald, who's graduating, you needed, or out of eligibility, you needed a guy to step in I think his production at kind of the level he's at, he was at South Carolina. So in the SEC is a big deal coming here. And I think, I mean, I know some people have kind of he's talked about, he considered coming here. He was obviously, I think FSU was kind of in his final 3 out of high school. But he ended up going to South Carolina and had some questions about Mike Norvell. And I think it's safe to say this season has answered those questions. And I mean, he's a guy who could absolutely come in and even though he's got 2 years left, have this be his next year be his last year if things go well. Kyle Morlock is a more traditional tight end, I think people would say. I think some really impressive blocking highlights, especially, I mean, receiving too, but a really impressive blocker at the D2 level. And I think that's something that FSU was lacking from its tight ends at time this season. I think receivers were blocking well. The tight ends, I think, got better as the season went on, but especially early on, there were some problems there. But also, I mean, like you said, an athletic guy who I know, I mean, Tennessee was in on. I think a number of other schools, I think Colorado tried to get in on him late. There was a lot of interest for him, and it's a big get. I think you see the highlights too if you go watch them. There's the playmaking ability too. There's, I mean, for a 6'7" or 6'6", 6'5", whatever height you want to say he is. I knew you were about to put that in there, Pat. I think he moves well, and he may not. I mean, he's not going to have receiver breakaway speed, but I think he is capable of big plays. That I don't think he's going to look slow or lunky out there by any means.
Well, listen, and he does a great job against zone coverages and finding the soft spot. Listen, and with the receivers that Florida State is going to put around him, including Jaheim Bell and Johnny Wilson and Micah Pittman and maybe Winston Wright, and then you got Trey Benson. They're going to be Florida State's going to be able to create some mismatches for both of those tight ends when they get here. And Morlock was a devastating blocker at Division II level. There's always going to be questions about how guys will transition to moving up 2 levels. But as you said, Kurt, the list of teams that he had offers from the Tennessees, the Wisconsins with Luke Fickell, those guys are really good at evaluating players, and so it makes you feel like, and listen, let's face it, Mike Norvell and his staff have done a really good job of evaluating portal people. They haven't missed a lot. They've been much more successful than they have been unsuccessful. But yes, 2 guys that can really benefit this offense at tight end. And of course, guys, it's hard to believe how far this offensive line has come in the last 2 or 3 seasons. A huge day up front for FSU with the signing of 3 transfer portal offensive linemen. UTEP right tackle Jeremiah Byers, right guard for Colorado and the former team captain of the Buffaloes, Casey Roddick, and then Auburn guard Keandre Jones, not to mention a fabulous freshman, a guy that's got have a lot of potential as he gets here, Lucas Simmons, and then, of course, Chris Otto. Fish, kind of break these guys down. We talked a little bit earlier today. We think that Byers and Roddick probably have a chance to come in and will probably be starters day one. Start with Byers, who can play tackle or guard.
Yeah, the one thing you notice about Byers, we discussed this earlier, is his ability to change direction. He can have a guy rush up the field on him, and if the guy spins back, he has the footwork and an anticipation to see what's going to happen before it happens. You see it on some of the clips where he was at UTEP. He's very athletic. He's got great feet. He's got great balance. Some guys, you talk about balance and their technique, they lean over, they bend. He's not a bender. He doesn't lean over and almost fall over when he goes to block. He's got very good technique. I think he's the best of all the offensive linemen that I saw in the portal this year, and he's a big-time get. Roddick's more of a inside the phone booth type of player, somebody you probably see more in the SEC actually, or Big Ten, big physical guy. I don't know how athletic he is, but he's just fine inside the ACC as far as being a guard. I think he'll be very good, especially in their offense. They like to run block a lot. He could get out on a linebacker. He could dominate up front. I think he's a very good run blocker. There's some things where he may struggle with some quickness inside, but overall, I think those 2 guys can start. I think they're upgrades. I think that Dylan Gibbons and Meach did a very good job, but these guys both raise that floor and give them 2 better players inside.
Yeah, and listen, we talked a little bit. You were a little bit surprised that they decided to take a 3rd transfer. They did take Keandre Jones, who really played a lot of football his first 2 years at Auburn, started 19 games, and then was regulated to a backup role this year. Now, there could be a lot of reasons for that. We don't know what those were. But just talk about how you think he fits into this class.
Yeah, I think he's more of a depth piece than anything else, somebody that can play multiple positions in case somebody gets hurt. I think they're stout at the guard position. I really think that, especially with guys like Darius Washington coming back that can move inside. They've got a lot of parts inside. That's where they're very good. I think he's a good player. I saw some flaws in his game that I wasn't as impressed with as I was with the other 2 linemen they signed. But we've always talked about this. You could never have enough big bodies on the offensive line. This guy gives you guys with experience. And one thing they've shown is that even if a guy struggled at a prior school, Jason Turrentine struggled, he got better at Florida State. And sometimes going against guys, look, everybody wants to talk SEC, ACC, but a lot of the guys in the ACC, it's not the same week in and week out. You can do pretty well playing in that conference, and I think he's a very good addition, especially from a depth standpoint.
Yeah, and of course, if those guys are the immediate future, the long-term future is Lucas Simmons and Chris Otto, 2 guys we are extremely high on. You could go on and on about the upside that Lucas Simmons has and how good he could be if he lives up to his potential. And then, of course, you and I, you were one of the people that first found Chris Otto. We got to see him in Seminole Showcase Camp in July, where he went up against some of FSU's top defensive line recruits, held his own, was very impressive. Talk a little bit, first of all, about Lucas Simmons. We heard Alex Atkins say that he was the priority on the offensive line out of any recruit they got, which speaks to the fact that they are thinking long-term future. Just talk a little bit about Lucas, because there's a lot to like.
Yeah, I mean, you hear so much under Mike Norvell, culture, fit. character, all these other words that people like to throw around. We kept saying if they are going to stand by those words that they talk about, Otto fits everything that we just discussed. He's a great young man. I think from what he brings to the table as far as physical talent, you could see it on film. He's very athletic. I mean, he can play tackle. I think he's a guy that can play the swing positions, move into guard, possibly even play center. He could be this team's version of Cam Irving, a guy that came in and started on the D line. I think this kid's athletic. He does everything you want. And the one thing you have to love is from us talking to him or speaking with him that time, this is a hardworking kid. If he's not good at something, I think he's going to put the work in to become a great player. And I think if he's patient and the Florida State program is patient with him, because all these guys want to jump in the portal right away. I don't think he's one of those guys. I think he's a guy that 3 years down the road that could develop into a starter and be an all ACC type player.
Well, plus, with our discussions with him, Fish, obviously he's got a long-term view of his life. He's talked about wanting to go to a school with a good film school. Florida State has that. Not one time since we spoke with him for about 30 minutes this summer after he camped here. Not one time did he talk about the NFL. He did not talk about the NFL. He's kind of mature beyond his years, and you can't always like kids because of their personality. But we like Chris on film first. And then, getting to know him has been kind of neat. He's one of those kids that's rare to find. You pull for him, and glad that he got the offer from Florida State he was waiting on. And just talk about Lucas Simmons.
I mean, Lucas Simmons, Florida State fans, offensive tackle in Florida State seem like the unicorn of high school football recruiting. We wanted one. They supposedly existed, but we never saw one for a very long time. At Florida State, he's the prototypical left tackle. He's a big kid, 6'6", 6'7", on who's what type of size cleats and how big they are. But he's a big kid. He's got length. He's not super long. If you meet him in person, his arms don't come down to his ankles, but he does have that length. But athletically, he's got all the tools to be a guy that not only could play on Saturdays, but eventually play on Sundays. He's that good and has that much upside. And I think if he's another guy, if he's willing to put in the work, this comes down to, listen, all the guys that they sign can play at Florida State. It's now putting the time in, buying in, and developing and, get in that weight room. He does need to get bigger and stronger. He's a little light in the butt. He can do some things, though. And I think from a left tackle standpoint, I think he's going to be a very good one. He's another guy that can be an All-American and be a NFL draft pick down the road.
Bob and Kurt, I want to get y'all's input on the offensive line group. It is an impressive group. What stands out to you about it, Bob?
I think you knew that you had some leadership leaving, some guys like a Dylan Gibbons and a Dimitri Emanuel. You knew you had to plug in potentially some guards transfers there. Also very curious to see Bryson Estes, how he develops and battles for a starting job. I think, again, it's bringing in experience, leadership, guys who can be mentors truly for some of these younger linemen, some guys who can be mentors and help in the developmental process. And I'm kind of like you guys, a little bit surprised that they ended up bringing in 3 offensive lineman transfers, especially when you factor in Caden Lyles and Bless Harris are almost kind of like new transfers in a sense because Bless only played one game in 2022. So you've got a lot of bodies, you've got a lot of quality and quantity now in that room. I thought Jerry Cutts asked a good question in the press conference about competition, and there's competition everywhere on this team, but perhaps maybe the most at offensive line, where you've got so many veterans with the playing experience, as well as some younger guys who are just trying to, get into that depth chart.
Yeah, they've got some young guys that we think get a chance to develop pretty quickly and be pretty good. Kurt, your take on the offensive line group?
Yeah, no, I think you talk to people about Alex Atkins and how he is talking to recruits to what Bob said. And he talked about they'll often say, he won't sugarcoat it. He's the type of guy who will only offer you an opportunity. And that may be the case with some of these guys. I think there's absolutely a world where we don't know if Keandre Jones is a contributor next year or truthfully, Fish brought up Jazz Turnentine. If Bless Harris hadn't got hurt, I'm not sure Jazz would have had a role. He may have just been a reserve player all year if kind of the starting 5 had remained in there. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out because, the Julian Armellas and the Bryson Estezes. That will be fascinating to monitor. Like I said, relative to where things were, it's a nice problem to have. And I think relative to even like what class was it a few years ago when they brought in Bob, like a bunch of linemen, but there were questions about all of them. I think you feel a lot better about this group. I mean, Lucas Simmons, I think, is a really impressive guy. Fish talked to him about a good bit. Just, I mean, a guy who hasn't played much football. I think he has the pedigree. His dad played on the offensive line at Oklahoma a while ago, I think in the 90s. But yeah, you can see absolutely a very bright future for him if he's kind of afforded that time. And I like Cruzado. I mean, interviewing him, I liked him a lot and talking about the film stuff. And I think if he'd had almost a better offer list that he was reporting because he was open to more schools, if he didn't have to be stuck in the film world, he may have been a higher regarded guy. I think we all kind of think he's a underrated potential guy.
Yeah, he's always the smartest guy in whatever room he's in. He had Princeton, Harvard. He probably had MIT. Does MIT have a football team? I don't know. Listen, we're fixing to let you guys go, but we're going to cover the defense with Jerry. But I just want to get your who you're looking forward to seeing out of the defensive signees.
I might go Blake Nicholson because honestly, I think there's still a chance for him to get up there into that 2 deep. I know that's a little bit of a battle because you got some guys going back like Kalen, DJ, Tatum, but honestly, we all really like Blake Nicholson and we think he's a long-term guy who's going to be there. But does he get in on special teams? Can he get in on the 2 deep? I kind of like Blake. I think he can get some playing time.
Yeah, Kurt, who you looking forward to seeing?
I know. I guess you'll touch on defensive end as kind of maybe the one negative of the day later, but I'm excited about Lamont Green Jr. I think he's an encouraging prospect. Had a big senior season down there, and I mean, obviously, the legacy always adds a bit of intrigue. And I think he's a guy who could it'd be interesting to see if he can carve out a role right away.
All right, guys. Well, we appreciate y'all joining us. We are going to bring in Osceola publisher Jerry Cutts here momentarily, but an impressive haul for FSU on offense with 12 players signed, including 3 transfer portal offensive linemen, 3 wide receivers, 2 tight ends through the portal, Brock Glenn at quarterback, and running back Sam Singleton. So a nice day full of playmakers and accomplished offensive linemen. Byers was an all-conference player at UTEP. Obviously, Roddick was team captain for the Buffaloes. So we got some good fits there. Guys, thanks for joining us. Bob, enjoy the basketball game. Kurt's going back to work on football. So it's been a busy day. Appreciate you guys joining us.
Thanks,
guys.
All right, Fish. Another great discussion. Always fun to get everybody's perspective on that. And we are fixing to let Jerry in the room. But Fish, we want to ask you first. We got a question from James Stovall. I can't see the screen. Already got it too small.
Well, it says, Fish, do you think FSU will have a top 10 offense next year? That's a softball question, considering that, yes, I definitely think that they're going to have one of the best offenses in the country. They added the additions of Jaheim Bell and also bringing in the kid from Shorter. They finally have a complete offense. They're going to be very difficult to stop next year offensively, and they should have one of the top 10 offenses in the country for sure.
All right, well, we're going to switch over to the defensive side of the ball. That's Jerry's favorite side of the ball, and kind of want to get his thoughts on the defense, and yours too, Fish. And we better do a good job because I just noticed that Coach Jim Gladden is watching us, and we're going to get critiqued. So we got to be sharp, guys. So there's no pressure. We just got one of the all-time great coaches at Florida State tuning in to see how we do. But all right, guys, let's Jerry. Before we get started on the defense. Obviously, we just talked about the offensive players. I kind of want to get your overall assessment of the class as a whole and then what you liked about the offensive side of the ball from a signee perspective.
I like the overall class, and if Coach Gladden is listening, I think he would second me on this, and that it's a balanced class. And that's the thing that I think I learned from Jim as much as anybody, is that you got to recruit for not just your needs, but for future needs. And a balanced class, I think this class is 11 players on offense and 11 players on defense. And if you look at it position by position on offense and defense, it's very balanced. So that's the first thing you got to do is, recruit to your needs and for the future. And I think they did that. So I'd grade them high on that. When you get into the individual talents, I know you guys have already been talking it, so I don't want to rehash it too much, but there's some unique talents at each position on the offense and some unique talents on the defense. So yeah, I would rate it very high. And and listen, there's one kid they didn't get in this class, and isn't that the way it always is?
Yes. Well, listen,
It wouldn't be recruiting.
you can't miss something you never really had in the first place. Isn't that the old saying?
Well,
But
yeah.
it was a terrible way for that courtship to break up because it had been long standing, and we are going to talk about that. Let's talk before we get to that, Jay. We're going to give you a chance to chime in on that. Let's talk about the guys that they did sign. 10 guys on defense. Let's start up front, Fish and Jerry. They signed defensive tackle Daryl Jackson from Miami, kid that played at Gaston County High School for FSU's current director of player development, Corey Fuller, so it's somebody knew well. KJ Simpson, another defensive tackle out of high school. And then, as we said, Lamont Green Jr. out of high school, and he may or may not be joining us at some point tonight. And then, of course, Jaden Jones, a junior college defensive end from Hutchinson, Kansas. Fish, we kind of had this discussion earlier. Somebody made the comment that Daryl Jackson was the third best defensive tackle on Miami's team last year. You and I kind of disagree. We think he's a guy that can fill the hole that may be left by Fabian Lovett. And if Fabian were to decide to return for the 2023 season, Daryl Jackson is a guy that between him and Fabian Lovett could be a dominating tackle duo inside for Florida State. Just give me your thoughts on Daryl Jackson.
Well, I mean, he's such a big part of this class, mainly because when you saw Fabian Lovett go out last year, that's when FSU really struggled up front on the D line, that teams were able to run in the middle of the line of scrimmage. So he gives them size. And if you watch Miami, that was his strength, was stuffing the run. He's a very big, tall, physical guy. And from the people that I've spoken to, this was the one guy Miami did not want to lose on that defensive line or their entire roster. He was a big piece that they were counting on in the 2023 season.
Yeah, and of course, he started his career at Maryland, transferred to Miami before this past season, so he will have to file an NCAA waiver to be eligible next year. There's reason to believe. We think it's a medical waiver. We've seen those in my time in college football, seen those approved before. Not saying that they will be, but those things, that's a pretty normal process. Jerry, just your thoughts on the importance of getting Daryl Jackson.
Well, I thought, definitely a mature guy who can come in and help right away. I thought interestingly in his recruitment, not to, you stated it, but I want to double down on it, was the fact that Corey Fuller had coached him. Everything's about evaluations and relationships, isn't it, in recruiting? And Corey had that relationship with him from the past, and probably is why he transferred here. And he also knew, the kid's heart. Corey also recruited and not recruited, but coached Farmer. So Odell had a very high comfort with Corey's evaluation of the kind of person that he's getting in this recruit.
All right, then let's move. There's the high school prospect they signed for defensive tackles, KJ Sampson. Fish, you've alluded to the fact that he reminds you of some of those big, tall, thick guys that Clemson has recruited over the last 10 years. Brian Breezy comes to mind. Just talk a little bit about KJ's potential in this defense and what you like about him.
Yeah, Florida State's had a history of great defensive tackles. I think this is the first one in a while that you've gone on and you turn the film on, and he just bursting through the line of scrimmage. He's very quick off the football. He's able to not only stop the run, but he also can collapse the pocket, make the quarterback feel uncomfortable. And if you have those edge rushers like FSU's had the last few years, that makes their job easier, because if the quarterback cannot step up in the pocket, it makes life very difficult. And Keith Sampson's one of those guys that can do it.
All right. Listen, we got. I think we got a guest here we want to bring on. Aria, do we have time to bring on Lamont Green Jr.?
Hello.
There he is. We got his forehead.
Welcome to the show, man.
Hello.
How's it going?
Going great.
It's been a heck of a day. Listen, number one, thanks for joining us. I know that you've got no shortage of requests, and I know you've known Fish for a long time, and I'm going to kind of let him lead the way through this thing. But I want to ask you, it probably feels like you've been committed from Florida State since birth. How does it feel to finally officially be a Florida State Seminole?
Feels like closing to like the first half of my life and the second part. Like, feels like all the hard work finally came to fruits. Finally came all together.
Well, Fish, tell us what you like about Lamont.
Well, listen, the first time I saw him, at Florida State, I believe he was in the 9th or 10th grade. And you saw even back then, his physical ability was already there. I mean, the physical talent, his ability to get up the field, rush the passer. He had a game. I think you had 2 games in 1 week this year where you had 7 sacks in 2 games. Your dad, he kind of bragged about it to me. How did you have so much success in such a short time that week? And tell us a little bit about the rest of the season you had.
Way I got all those sacks is I just stayed relentless. Every time there was a new play, I pretended like it was the first play of the game, just kept going, giving full effort. I just kept getting after it. And so you saw I got 7 sacks. What was the second question?
No, that was basically how your season went, overall.
Hey, Lamont, what are you happy that the recruiting process is over? And what will you miss about it? And what will you not miss about it?
What will I miss about it?
If anything.
Maybe being able to say 4-star, but in college that really doesn't matter anymore. What I really didn't like about it was how some people were rated way lower than what they should have been, but in the end, it doesn't really matter once you get to college.
And what are you most excited about when it comes to getting to campus and joining this football team?
Just seeing how Coach Odell and JP develop me and seeing what I can do under them.
Lamont, what was it about? Well, I know that you have a legacy with Florida State, but on your own, what was it that you liked about Florida State?
What I liked?
Yeah.
Tradition, the energy, especially the coaching staff this year, the players. I just love everything about Florida State. Like you said, someone said before, I was pretty much just born committed.
I'm glad I got that one right.
So you've known Odell for a lot of years. I mean, how old were you when you first met him and started paying attention to what Odell was about?
Earliest memory I got with Coach Odell is him slamming me against the sled like 6-7 times, and I was like 11 or 12 at the time. Wait, no. Like 12, 13.
He was slamming you against the sled?
Yeah, I was trying to just get the rep over with, and then he kept saying, "You want to be good at this game? You got to get back on there." And I won 6-7 times in a row.
Oh, wow.
You look at the rest of your class, Lamont. Who are some of the guys you kind of built relationships already with that were in your class in this 2023 class?
People in this class, like you talk about other FSU recruits, or just
FSU recruits that maybe you got to meet during the process. Some of the guys that you got along with.
Talked a bit with Lucas Simmons. Had that cooking competition with Dre Jacobs. Saw Hakeem Williams around the campus whenever there was any type of event going on. Saw Otto. Who else? Well, there's some other people, but yeah.
FSU's. I was going to jump in real quick. One more question. FSU's had a great tradition of defensive ends. Is there one, or is there any defensive end that you kind of patterned your game after, somebody that's played at Florida State?
Like I kind of tried to copy off of Jermaine Johnson and Jared Verse, but I just took some moves from them. The rest is all me.
Well, we are looking forward to getting you up here, Lamont, and getting to watch you in practice. And of course, you mentioned Lucas Simmons. I have a feeling that you and him are going to get to know each other really, really well over the next 3 or 4 years in pass protection drills. So that's going to be fun to watch. And of course, I know you're busy. We want to thank you for joining us, taking time away from your family and friends on such an important day. And we look forward to getting to know you over these next 3 or 4 years that you'll be in Tallahassee.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, Lamont. Have a great night.
You too.
All right, guys. That was fun. We got to talk to one of the guys that just had a life-changing moment, and I'm glad I was right that he had been committed to Florida State since birth. I didn't know how he was going to feel about that.
That was an episode of Cribs. He walked us all the way through his house.
That's
Between
right.
That and Jerry's dog, we got a great show going.
There you go.
He's doing something. He's doing something I'm not doing. He's getting his 10,000 steps in.
Exactly.
All right. Hey, well, let's move. He's going to have a book in that just signed with him, and that is defensive end Jaden Jones from Hutchinson, Kansas. Was hurt this year, did not play, has not played a lot the last 2 years, Fish. But we saw him for his official visit. I said this early when we had our first show this afternoon. Whether he's playing or not, he's one of those guys that you want to be the first off the bus. He is he's chiseled and a guy that was highly successful in high school, a good player, and obviously somebody that Mike Norvell and this coaching staff feels pretty good about. Just talk to us a little bit about Jaden Jones.
Yeah, you can't argue with the success they've had at that position, getting Jermaine come in and then now Verse. I joked about it earlier that I didn't expect Verse to have that big of an impact early on, and then he came out and made me look like a fool against LSU and dominated the game. So I'm not going to discount anything Jaden can do because from my sources that are JUCO guys, he's very high on Jaden. Big physical kid. I believe he may have even played basketball at one point, but he has all the physical traits you want in a defensive end. He has a chance to be really good. He's going to have to work hard to get back to full strength. He did have a knee injury last year, which held him out. So that means he hasn't had a lot of play time, game time footage or getting on the field at this junior college. So it's going to be new to him stepping in at Florida State since he hasn't played in a while.
Well, listen, Fish, you beat yourself up about the whole expectations for Verse coming into this season. We all did it. We were trying to do the responsible thing. We didn't think that, listen, Jermaine Johnson was 11th round draft pick, our 11th person drafted in that draft last year. It was hard to believe that Verse could have been that good, and they are different players. But you did your job, and listen, it's always good when you're wrong that way, right? When they exceed expectations. So
hey, I'm owning up to it, man. Everybody says that I don't own up to stuff, so I'm owning up to it.
I was guilty of it. Marcel was guilty of it. I believe Jerry was guilty of it. We all said, "Hey, temper your expectations." Yeah. But hey, all right. So this is where Jerry will take over this. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, let me just say something about Jaden and also Sampson. Both of those. I'm going to keep repeating myself here about evaluations, and with Jaden, it was really tough to evaluate him because they evaluated him off of practice film, and when he got into the season, he got hurt really early. But they had already seen the things that him and the way he moved and the things he did that they were able to evaluate him. So that one, if that proves out that he's what they think he can be, we're going to go back and look at that as quite an evaluation.
Yep.
The other kid, Sampson, that we talked about a minute ago, in the interviews I did today with the coaches, Adam Fuller told me that when he first watched him, it was about his movement, that he moved like effortlessly for a big guy. And then when he got up there and watched him, again, it wasn't really watching him in football, it was watching him in the weight room and doing some things that were uncommon for a big man. So I think I overemphasize this probably, but anybody can recruit. Not everybody can evaluate.
I agree with that.
And I think this coaching staff is starting to prove their chops as evaluators. Now, in the next year, we'll find out how good this class is. But I thought both of those were interesting recruitments for evaluation.
Yeah. So Jerry, is it true that you're sitting in a massage chair?
Yeah, no, it's behind me. Thanks for noticing, Daniel.
Daniel pays attention to the most random things.
Yeah.
The art on the wall, because I know that'll be the next question.
And he's typing in all caps tonight. Daniel, you sure you're okay?
No, he's never okay.
All right. Well, hey, we're fixing to let Jerry talk again because we're going to talk about his favorite position on the entire football field, and that is the linebackers. And Florida State got a good pair of them. And we'll start with kind of the headliner, which is Blake Nicholson, the headliner because he came all the way over from the West Coast, which is a long way to go to play football. And obviously a guy that has been there's been a lot of buzz about. He spent an extended time in Tallahassee this summer, came for an official visit, stayed for an unofficial visit, extended, kind of was around practice a little bit in the early preseason. But guys, he is a phenomenal football player. He plays about every snap of every game in high school, led his team in rushing, led his team in receiving this year, and played just about every snap on defense, made 46 tackles, all kind of TFLs and sacks. Jerry, I'm going to let Fish has already talked to him. We'll let Fish talk about him, but I'm going to let you start Blake Nicholson.
Yeah, I talked to Randy about him, and what Randy's so impressed by is his athleticism, his versatility. I mean, as you said, he's a heck of a running back. He played quarterback for his high school. He's played safety, corner. I mean, he's played every position you can play, and he's been outstanding at it. So in a game, this is Randy talking now, in the world we're in today, where your linebackers have to be versatile. When an offense spreads, they might have a tight end, they might have a back out of the backfield, and occasionally get hung up on they get a matchup with a wide receiver. And he believes Blake's that guy that can handle his own in that space. So, Pat, in my head, I kind of see Kirk Carruthers, right? But this guy might be, even more athletic than Kirk. Kirk came in as a tight end.
That's right.
And, this is a guy that they were laughing, joking about it today, is there's going to be a little bit of a fight for him as to what position they put him at. And Randy's answer to that on the show tonight was great. He said he's going to be in my room, not in the secondary. But if they walk that tight end far enough out, then he'll be in the secondary.
Yeah, well.
But he's in my room. Yeah. So I think, they're really excited about that guy. It's amazing. We went through another year without an interception. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, we may not have had a fumble recovery from our linebacker position.
Yeah, I can't remember an interception by a linebacker. It's been a while, but yeah, he is certainly an outstanding looking prospect. And Fish, I think Fish and Jerry, I think we all expect him to contribute in some way next year. We saw Mike play some true freshmen this year on special teams. Linebackers are only 6 scholarships deep coming into this next football season. Before obviously Nicholson and Ward, there'll be 8 right now if everybody comes back. But Fish, just talk about what do you think about his chances to play next year, meaningful snaps?
Yeah, I think he has a great shot at starting, or not starting, but playing next year, just because of his athletic ability and a lot of the things he can do. He runs very, very well. He has great lateral quickness. He can move. He doesn't take those false steps. That's the one concern when you're watching a linebacker. Do they move forward, move backwards? Do they have that false step? He does all the right things. I think technically he's very sound. I remember I always go back to one conversation I had with Butch Davis. Butch told me that he really liked linebackers that used to play running back as well. You saw that with John Beeson, also with Dan Morgan in high school, and as well as DJ Williams. You've seen that with this kid. This kid played running back. He reminds me of someone more recently. I say this is Brian Cushing. I was a big Brian Cushing fan when he came out of high school. I think he has a lot of the same traits that Brian had. He's very athletic. You could put him on a tight end. He's big enough and fast enough to cover a tight end. He has the speed and quickness to handle backs and receivers in space. I think he's an every down linebacker. I don't think he's one of these guys that you're going to have to pull off the field because he can't get deep enough in his drops or he is not athletic enough. I think this is one of the better linebackers they've signed from what I've seen on film. I think he's grossly underrated. There's not many linebackers I've watched on film this offseason where I thought, hey, this guy's much better.
Yeah,
and he's bigger than you would think for an athlete.
Yeah.
Randy,
He's got thick legs, he's got thick thighs, and I mean, he looks like an athlete.
He comes in bigger than Deloach.
Yes, yeah. No doubt. He's all right, 200 pounds, and he's got 9 months to get. I would imagine he'll be a little bit bigger than that time he gets here. All right, Jerry, DeMarco Ward, a little bit less heralded as a recruit, a different type of player, more of your old inside 4-3 linebacker. Obviously, what were your impressions of him, and what did Randy think when you talked to him about the linebacker?
Yeah, so Randy put him in the same category. He was also a tailback, and they ran him a lot. Of course, Lundy was a tailback in high school, if you can imagine. So Randy likes that guy who can play both ways, and he's 6'1", 210. He's bigger than you would think. He's here on campus.
Yep.
He could have stayed home on vacation, but he enrolled. He's here practicing with the team, so he's out there.
Okay.
And that impressed the coaches. He was there at the function tonight, and so I got to take a look at him. And he's a pretty thick kid.
Yeah, he's slapped together. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. So a Bethune-looking guy, not quite as thick as Bethune, was sort of built like that, and so interesting athlete, and very, very underrated. Very much. I don't know about underrated, but he's kind of not heralded.
Yeah, and I know Mike bragged on him today in his press conference about it being a very instinctive football player, which sometimes when you don't watch full game tape, you don't get a true feel for. And obviously we're making our evaluations based off huddle, and they're just there wasn't a ton of tape. But listen, obviously benefit of the doubt, he's looks like a very solid high school football player who has a bright future based on everything we've heard about him so far. Fish, moving to the secondary, a couple of our favorite players are in this group. Again, guys like DeMarco Ward that haven't gotten all the billing during the recruiting process, and probably a guy that stands out to both of us, and we've talked about it before, is Quintarius Jones out of Mississippi. Boy, you watch him. He is a fantastic athlete. We've talked about the fact that he lines up all over the place for his high school, is an unbelievable receiver with great ball skills and great concentration, a guy that can run, a racer on defense. Where do you think he ends up on this defensive side of the ball, and what are your thoughts on him as a football player?
Listen, a couple of years back, they took Shaheem Brown, who I thought was a good player. This kid is already a better football player coming out of high school, in my opinion. You see what Shaheem's already done at Florida State. I think he can have the same type of impact. He's very versatile. That's the one thing you've noticed with a lot of these players who are recruiting. They're not stuck to playing one position. You don't want a guy that's just a strong safety, and if strong safety doesn't work out, you have to process him because there's nowhere to play him. This is a kid that's going to get a shot to play multiple positions. He can play close to the line of scrimmage. He's very effective at stopping the run. But if you watch him in coverage, he's not a liability. A lot of guys with his size and play that strong safety position or that safety position are not as athletic as he is. He sees the ball very well. He reacts. He has very good instincts. He closes extremely well, and he finishes. A lot of guys don't finish now. They just kind of wrap up. He runs through guys. And I think he's very physical. I think he's a player that could run down on special teams as a freshman and see action right away.
Yeah, listen, you don't ever know what's going to happen when some of these kids get to college. We've seen it. We see it every year on every campus. But I am really excited to see this kid. in person whenever he gets on the field for Florida State. Tremendous prospect, I think. And then a kid we both kind of feel the same way about, different kind of player, but Jabril Rawls from Pensacola Catholic does everything for his high school: receiver, safety, corner, returns punts, returns kicks. I think he scored a touchdown just about every way you could, minus blocking the field goal and returning that himself. But a guy that's long, lanky, probably needs some time to produce, but really looks like an outstanding prospect. Fish. What are your thoughts on Jabril?
Yeah, I mean, he's another kid you get to meet. We had that, reeling him in segment with him, and he was very impressive young man. He's very, you could tell he's a smart kid. I think the game will come easy to him because he seems like a very bright kid. He's got the size and length. He's a little light right now, so he is going to have to get in that weight room, eat a little of that honey chicken or whatever they have at Florida State for the football players. He's going to have to put on some weight. He's probably not going to be a guy that's a day one guy that's going to come in and play right away. But I think if he puts a little weight on, he could be a situational guy year one. But in 2 years from now, I think he could be a really good corner.
Yeah, and of course, another guy that may be a corner at Florida State is Edwin Joseph, someone you know and have followed really closely, Fish. Just tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, he's probably, along with Quindarius, one of the most underrated players in the class. Here's a guy that's on a very talented team. It's difficult for guys that aren't the well-known prospects to stand out on a talented team. Jerry got to see Chaminade with me. He stood out. He had some nice catches on offense, but you can see he just seems like a more fluid and more there's something about him that you like on the defensive side of the ball. He has range. He has versatility. He's not just stuck playing corner. He could play in this over the slot. I think he can move into safety. He's going to give them some options on that back end, and he's someone I do feel can play next year.
Yeah, and of course, FSU's had a lot of success with safeties out of the Jacksonville, Florida area. Got KJ Kirkland, a hard-hitting safety, looks really good and on the hoof. We saw him on his official visit this past weekend, and a guy that looks like he's got a bright future in Tallahassee. Jerry, have you had any chance to watch KJ?
Just a little bit on film, and he's rangy.
Yep.
He can cover a lot of ground. And he's got a frame that, you can look at it and say he's a safety, but that guy could grow into a linebacker as well.
Yeah, look, we've seen Florida State take safeties like Brandon Gant and move him up. It was probably more of a need thing for the number standpoint, but they certainly left him there. So you're right, and Fish and I have talked about it. You wonder if a guy like Quindarius Jones may be in one of those hybrid linebacker safety spots that FSU uses in its 4-2-5 defense. Any thoughts on Rawls, Joseph, or Quindarius Jones, Jerry?
Yeah, Joseph, in my interview with Adam Fuller, when they were recruiting him, some of the other coaches identified him as a receiver. And so they were looking at him as a receiver, and they asked Adam what he thought about him, because he played both ways, and what he thought about him as a defensive back. And Adam was watching this film as a receiver, and the way that he attacked the ground with his feet on his cuts, caught his eye. Again, evaluation.
Yep.
Very aggressive with his feet on his cuts, and for him, that's the earmark of a defensive back. And so when he started watching his defensive back film, he was like, "Yeah, this guy can play for me." So they cross-checked on him, and Adam liked him as a defense.
Well, it's an impressive class. Like we talked about the balance, but certainly a lot of guys to be excited about. And listen, this is a day of celebration for the Florida State football program, Florida State fans. Like we said, coming into the show, it's kind of like Christmas Day for people that follow recruiting, people that are fired up about the program, and it seems to be at an all-time high since, Jerry, you took over the Osceola. A lot of excitement. But unfortunately, things didn't go totally FSU's way, and I don't want to belabor the point because it is a time to talk about the kids that are coming to Florida State and not the ones that aren't. But obviously one of the highest rated kids that Florida State had committed, Fish and Jerry, was Keldrick Falk. He was in town on Saturday for the groundbreaking at the football facility, and then obviously visited Auburn and Hugh Freeze on Sunday before it went to a dead period. And today, obviously, we learned around lunchtime that Keldrick Falk had flipped from FSU to Auburn. Fish, tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are on that and how he impacts this class and what Florida State now has to do, because we don't think they're done everywhere yet.
Yeah, I mean, the disappointing thing is he's one of the top pass rushers, defensive ends in the country, and those kids don't grow on trees. You know, pass rushers, quarterbacks, these guys are the ones you want to stack your roster with. You've seen what Florida State's done at the defensive end position the last couple of years. I thought Falk had a chance to be a very special player in college just because of his size, his length, his quickness off the ball. He reminded me a lot of watching him was like watching Josh Sweat's high school film. I thought he could have been a very good football player. It's kind of surprising, honestly, that a school is able, and I know he's from Alabama and stuff. It's kind of surprising that FSU had that relationship, that long relationship, and a coach that has probably never even met him until 2 weeks ago was able to sway him. But this is part of the issue you have when you recruit Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. There's always that chance that at the end they could pull a kid like this. And that's part of the recruiting those states. You're gonna roll the dice. Sometimes you're gonna hit it, sometimes you're not.
Yeah.
I was going to say that, Pat, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people thinking this is an NIL situation. And to Fish's point, it's always been tough to get a kid out of Alabama or those southern states before NIL.
Right.
You know, I mean, this doesn't have a thing to do with NIL to me. This is about just doing whatever it takes to get a kid.
Yeah,
And,
I feel FSU could have probably matched anything financially from an NIL standpoint. I think this kid when the home team shows interest and, mom wants to see you play closer to home, and that stuff makes a big deal. And Auburn is always one of those teams in Alabama. There's not many of those battles FSU's won. They won it with Jameis, but those things are few and far between. You got to get a little lucky when you're recruiting those states.
Well,
Exactly.
Listen, and Auburn got a makeover. There's positive buzz around that program with Hugh Freeze. Kind of the new girl's always the prettier girl, right? Kind of thing. And he is 18 years old. But yeah, disappointed for Florida State. Wish Keldrick Falk the best, but certainly would have liked to see him in garnet gold on the opposite side of Boots Lamont Green. FSU head coach Mike Norvell alluded to it in his press conference. They're probably still not done. Fish and I both believe that, and I think you do too, Jerry.
Yeah.
3 guys that we believe they're still involved with are defensive tackle Braden Fisk from Western Michigan, who we believe Florida State, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, several others are involved with. Fincherell Deuce Cypress, the cornerback from Virginia, is still thought to be on FSU's radar. We know there's interest there. Both those kids were in town this past weekend on official visits. And then the story around Conrad Hussey, the defensive back, has gotten kind of crazy. He's Penn State, then Florida State, then back to Penn State, then back to Florida State. Then there's rumors all over the place. Now Miami's involved in this, and he has delayed his announcement. Fish, just talk a little bit about each of those guys, Fisk, and what he could bring to this defense if they were to get him.
I think he would bring another addition. You're talking about Hussey, right? That's who.
I went back to Fisk.
Oh, all right.
Defensive tackle.
All right, man. It's been a long day, but
Yes, we're almost done.
Listen, you can never have. I'm going to keep, beating the drum on this. You can never have enough defensive linemen. Just from a depth standpoint, you saw last year when FSU had to go to some of the second stringers, their defense wasn't as effective up front. This kid's going to provide at least a productive second teamer. I think he can do some stuff both inside and out. I think you can move him outside on some certain situations. If you go to a 3-man front, you can slide him inside on some pass rush situations. He's a very good football player. I don't know if he's going to be a super impact type player, but I do think he could be very productive at Florida State.
Yeah, I think if Lovett goes out, they really need to get him. I think if Lovett stays for whatever reason, if that's what he decides to do, I think he's a very good complementary piece of that defensive front, particularly when you bring in Daryl Jackson into that mix as well, along with the kids that are coming back, the Farmers, the Rays, and then we've got the Tafasi, who's going to be a player we think who's going to he'll be eligible next fall. So then Cypress, you think, is a first-day starting corner, correct?
Yeah, I definitely think the day that he steps on campus, he becomes their number one corner. If you watch him, you could kind of put him out there on an island, let him shut down half the field. And we discussed this, and Jerry could discuss this a little more. When a defensive coordinator could put one guy on the other team's best receiver, and you basically can roll your coverage to the other side, it helps the defense overall. And with FSU's pass rush, that makes it even more impressive with what they'll be able to do. I think he's a very good corner. I like what he brings to the table. You can move him to the outside. You can put him in the slot. He could cover another team's top slot receiver. He's very fluid. He comes up. He likes to play the run. He's a physical kid. I think he'd be a great addition to the Florida State football team.
And then you were going to expound on Hussey, and I interrupted you.
It's all right. I mean, I got all these names flying through, but, Hussey comes from a very good program in St. Thomas Aquinas. Program's got a lot of stability. They've had a ton of success. They won another state championship. It's because of kids like Hussey. He's not going to blow you away. He's not a Derwin James. He's not a Jalen Ramsey type safety or defensive back, but he's a very good player that could come in. He could be a all ACC type kid down the road. His technique's very good. He doesn't have a lot of bad plays when you watch him play. I went to a game earlier this year. He jumped a route. He went about 95 yards for a touchdown, so he could create those big plays on defense. And that's the one thing Florida State has lacked last year, was the ability to not only make turnovers, but turnovers that turn into points or give Florida State's offense a short field. If you could do that with the guys on the back end, you got to get the pressure up front. Your offense becomes that much better. And guys like Hussey will only make you a better football team.
All right. And I want to ask both of you this question as we get ready to wrap up. As the roster sits right now with these 22 newcomers, now we know there's probably going to be some portal business going on after the bowl game. It's open for 45 days, I think, this time. But long story short, you might see some more guys enter the portal. But as the roster stands right now, Fish, where do you think Florida State needs to add guys, either if they find a late bloomer in high school, but probably more specifically, where do you go in the portal from here?
I definitely think if you could continue to upgrade that secondary, you can never have enough DBs. The way the game's played now, sometimes you have 5, 6 guys back there, 4 or 5 guys, 6 guys back in the back end of the defense. You want those extra bodies, guys that can cover a lot of ground and play multiple positions. But if you could get another speed rusher, a guy that can get pressure on the quarterback. Florida State had one last year, and then, Peyton started to develop. But if you had a second guy on the opposite side of Verse last year, how much better would their defense have been? So I think if they could add somebody to that edge, and that's pretty much it. Maybe another tackle. But overall, I think this team's in a good place moving forward in 2023.
Jerry, where do you think they need to add some more firepower based on where the roster is now?
I think I'm with Fish on that. I think they're in selection mode. If the right guy comes along at any position, you take him. Mike made that point today. You want big guys that run fast and have a good heart. And if you find them, I don't care what position they're in, you take them. But I don't think there's a real gaping position of need. Yeah.
Well, Fish, we've said the entire time that winning takes care of a lot of things in recruiting, and certainly a 9-3 record help attract guys like Byers, Roddick, Jones from the portal, and of course, big-time recruits like Hakeem Williams and Blake Nicholson, Lamont Green, among others. Get you a tackle like Daryl Jackson out of Miami. Impressive class, great day for the Seminoles. Guys, if you're going to give them a grade, what are you going to give them, Fish? And they're not done yet.
Yeah, I think they're at like that B+ overall. Close to an A grade. I think they pretty much hit on. You'd like for them to get a franchise quarterback, but they got a very good one. You would have liked to have Cedric Baxter, but they got a very good running back in Singleton. So they could have got better than they had, but I think overall it was a very solid class, top to bottom.
Jerry, what do you think this class says about Mike Norvell as he goes into his fourth year leading this program? And how do you think the fan base, you were at the event earlier tonight, how do you think they feel about this particular recruiting class?
Well, the event I was at tonight was the choir, that was the choir. So they were thrilled with it, absolutely. But I think, being realistic, I think, some of our fans are very concerned about the fact that we're missing on some Florida kids. And that's a legitimate concern. I'll talk about that just for a second. And that we're making up for it in the portal. And I think there's some truth to that, and I think it's reasonable that's where we're at. Pat, you remember, Fish, when we hired Mike Norvell, the concern was he didn't have a lot of Florida ties on his coaching staff. He had Odell and he had Ron Dugans. But other than that, the coaches he brought in with him didn't have a lot of Florida ties. They had the COVID year, which didn't help them. They couldn't go out on the road. And I think they're still in that phase of trying to establish Florida ties. I go back to evaluation. The Brock Glenn is a Memphis connection. All those coaches up there knew Brock's high school coach very well. His high school coach would work out over there at Memphis, bring his team out there to watch film with them. So when Brock came along, that was their comfort zone. You look at a coach like Dugans, his wife's from Vero Beach. We got a guy from Vero Beach in this signing class. It's all about relationships. And that's the one area I think if you were to grade this down a little bit is this class, we didn't cherry pick the state of Florida. Now, I think we cherry picked positions. I think our coaches would tell you that, Hakeem was the top kid in the country in their mind. That they liked Nicholson best of the linebackers they looked at. The tight end out of the portal, the Bell kid. So, they went and got guys, but they're just not Florida kids. I looked on the list, and of the 22 players on that list, 11 are from Florida. That's not uncommon. We've had years before where half the class were out of state.
And the portal's going to skew that to some degree.
Well, and let me just say this. This is, I think, significant. I've noticed, and I don't have statistics to support it, it's just anecdotal. But what I've noticed is most of the transfer kids come back closer to home. Bell, I asked, the tight end coach, why do you think Bell wanted to come to Florida State? And his first part of his answer was because of some of the things we do with our tight ends. But he very quickly said, because he's from Lake City. And that's where his family lives, and he wanted to be closer to home. So I think Mike's doing a good job in the portal. And I bring that up with emphasis because when we're talking about the defensive lineman that's considering Notre Dame, Florida isn't closer to home.
No, but yeah. And listen, they keep on going 9-3, and some of those Florida ties are going to get tighter. And listen, I do think, and we can talk about this in other episodes as we know they're going to continue to add people. But obviously, I do think the portal changes how you recruit, and I think when Florida State is more established, where they will get those, they'll go back to the old school, right, where they were picking who they wanted in the state of Florida and then go and filling out the roster with guys they felt were special everywhere else.
So the portal kind of, to me, becomes an eraser, a big eraser on your pencil. And they don't get Hakeem Williams. So mark my words. I'm willing to bet we're going to see a portal kid surface.
Yeah. You listen, there's too much. You're going to feel, I think, especially if you're not a top 4 or 5 program where you're cherry picking, you're going to see most of these programs go fill immediate needs through the portal because the coaches got to keep their jobs. I mean,
Exactly.
You get 3 years no matter where you're coaching anymore.
Right.
We've seen coaches get fired after 2 and 3 years here and a lot of other places. But yeah, that does make for a very layered conversation.
That'll be another conversation for another day.
Yeah. But hey, guys, I appreciate you guys taking time out of your evening. I know it's been a long day for all of us. We've been doing this since about 6 o'clock this morning, and obviously had a long day of prep yesterday as well as all season. But Fish, appreciate your expertise and joining us every week for these things. And Jerry, always love to get your insight, particularly when we start talking about these defensive guys, because you really do pay attention to those defensive guys that practice in the games. And listen, a good day for Florida State, a good day for Mike Norvell, and a special day for 22 young men who extended their college football playing careers here in Tallahassee. And we'll be back later in the recruiting season as Florida State continues to recruit towards the February signing date. And of course, look forward to seeing all of you, or as many of you in Orlando as are there, and celebrate this great season with a game against Oklahoma.
Pat, on that point, be looking in the Osceola the next couple of days for some events that we'll be doing down in Orlando.
And please go to theosceola.com or FloridaStateRivals.com. Check us out if you're not a subscriber. We'd love to have you join our site. We think we've got some unique coverage and a lot of guys that have great insight, unique perspective. Jerry among them. Jerry and Bob, 2 of the best writers I know. Obviously, getting to know Kurt, he's done a tremendous. He's been a workhorse for us all year. We got Ari Masudi behind the glass tonight, doing the creative services, and of course Charles Fishbein, and we'll get Mark Salva back in here too. But please go to theosceola.com if you're not a subscriber. Check us out. If you like us, please give us a try, and we will see you next time on Reeling Them In Recruiting Report. Thanks, guys.